So welcome YouTube and Twitch. Hi, it's an untidy day today. I know it's been an emotional day, Kiara, and it doesn't help that baby is sick. But yeah, let's do this thing where we just continue helping each other. I did not share the live out. Give me a second. There's unfortunately one thing that I can't really let go of, and that's the DMs I have between me and Voldemort on TikTok, because that's where we started our meme sharing and our video sharing, and he would be the first one sharing out my lives and all of those kinds of things. So I still have it, even though he no longer uses TikTok. I don't know. It's one thing I can't really let go of yet. But yeah, he's starting to do the things. We are on page 282 of Orientalism. And I figured if I have the energy, I'm going to go a little bit more, have more to delve into today. Let's see how much energy I have. Because I realized earlier that when I am distracted, I don't have to deal with my own shit. That is called, in the words of Legolas, a diversion. And also it's avoidance. But, oh, thank you, my love.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. You're handsome. So, we're still on Gibbs' work, where he talks about Islam as a living and vital religion, appealing to the hearts, minds, and consciousness of tens and hundreds of millions. And the way he talks about it is as a petrified religion, not in terms of being scared, but petrified in the sense of stuck in time. And he says that Islam in itself, in its petrified state throughout history, means that it cannot move into the modern world with any ease. And he asks how they can be reformulated without affecting essential elements. Understanding that Gibb is writing from an Islamophobic point of view. The last part of his message is familiar enough, suggesting the now traditional Orientalist ability to reconstruct and reformulate the Orient. So what he is saying is that it's not that Islam has reconstructed and reformulated itself. Rather, Orientalists have reconstructed and reformulated the Orient to fit their own narrative. In part, Gibbs' Islam exists ahead of Islam as it is practiced now, studied, or preached. Yet this prospective Islam, the Islam that he understands it to be, is no mere Orientalist fiction spun out of his ideas. It's based on a quote-unquote Islam that, since it cannot truly exist, appeals to a whole community of believers. And he doesn't suggest here that the believers are Islamic or Muslim. His suggestion is that the believers are Christian. The reason that Islam can exist in some more or less future Orientalist formulation of that in the Orient, Islam is usurped and traduced by the language of the clergy. And not only the clergy, as in capital T, capital C. We're talking about clergy as a whole, and its own clergy included, whose claim is upon a community's mind. So long as it is silent in its appeal, Islam is safe. The moment the reforming clergy take on its legitimate role of reformulating Islam in order for it to be able to enter modernity, the trouble starts. And that trouble, of course, is dislocation. Dislocating a historical practice, or a practice that is seen as ancient, outdated, and bringing it into what the West wants the future to be, is where the dislocation happens. Dislocation in Gibbs' work identifies something far more significant than a putative intellectual difficulty within Islam. It identifies, I think, the very privilege, the very ground on which the Orientalist places himself so as to write about, legislate for, and reformulate Islam in itself. And this is the entire point of Orientalism as a practice. Notice that everything that Saïd says throughout this book is, in a sense, actually, I would say not even in a sense, is quite sure. Like, he is certain of his own words, and he will stand by them and back them up. This is one of the very few times that Saïd says, I think. Not, hey JJ, not being uncertain of himself or his words, but more like, this is a little bit more my opinion than the rest of it. He's never uncertain, nor is he uncertain about his own opinions. Far from being a chance discernment of Gibbs' dislocation, it is the epistemological passageway into his subject, and subsequently the observation platform excuse me, from which all of his writing, and is every one the influential positions he filled, could survey Islam. Both the silent appeal of Islam into a monolithic community of orthodox believers and a whole merely verbal articulation of Islam by misled cause of political activists, desperate clerks, and opportunistic reformers, stood Gibb. He wrote, reformulated. His writing said either what Islam could or could not say, or what its clerics would not say. What Gibb wrote was, in a sense, temporarily ahead of Islam, in what he allowed that at some point in the future Islam would be able to say, or what it could not say now. In a sense, Gibb decided what Islam would be in the future. And I think his power of deduction is quite good. I mean, let's be honest here. He knew his own society. And by knowing his own society, deduced what role Islam would play inside it. In another important sense, however, Gibbs' writing on Islam predated the religion as a coherent body of living beliefs, since his writing was able to get hold of the Islam, quote-unquote Islam, as a silent appeal made to Muslims before their faith became a matter for worldly argument, practice, or debate. I would say that the underpinnings of Islamophobia being founded in Orientalism had already placed Islam at not at the center, but on the fringes of international debate in a world that has been ravaged by colonialism. He kind of looked to the future here and said, yeah, Islam is going to be a problem for us being the colonialists. The contradiction in Gibbs' work, for it is a contradiction to speak of Islam as neither what its clerical adherents in fact say it is, nor what, if they could, lay its followers would say about it, is muted somewhat by the metaphysical attitude governing his work, and indeed governing the whole history of modern Orientalism, which he inherited through mentors like MacDonald. The Orient and Islam have a kind of extra-real, phenomenologically reduced status that puts them out of reach of everyone except the Western expert. From the beginning of Western speculation about the Orient, the one thing the Orient could not do was represent itself. And this is a trend throughout history, is that the colonized were never allowed to represent ourselves. We were never allowed to write our own histories, to tell people this is what it is really like, because our word was never trusted. And in that meant field experts or subject experts on our lives, our cultures, our genealogies, our languages, our histories, our lived experience always had to be mediated through a white man. And I think I have just pathologized why I'm attracted to white men. Because I'm a storyteller and nobody is listening. I joke. Evidence of the Orient was credible only after it had passed through and been made firm by the refining fire of the Orientalist itself. Or Orientalist himself, sorry. Gibbs' oeuvre purports to be Islam or Mohammedanism, both as it is and as it might be. Metaphysically, and only metaphysically, its essence and potential are made one. Only a metaphysical attitude could produce such famous Gibb essays, such as The Structure of Religious Thought in Islam or An Interpretation of Islamic History. Without being troubled by the distinction made between objective and subjective knowledge in Gibbs' criticism of Massignon. The statement about Islam are made with confidence and a serenity that are truly Olympian. There is no dislocation, no felt discontinuity between Gibbs' page and the phenomenon it describes, for each, according to Gibb himself, because, we audit ourselves and we find ourselves not guilty of whatever we did, is ultimately reducible to the other. As such, Islam and Gibbs' description of it have a calm discursive plainness, whose common element is only the English scholar's orderly page. I attach in great detail of significance to the appearance of and to the intended model for the Orientalist page as a printed object. And it's important that it is a printed object, because one of the main reasons, and I love this little tidbit of history. Good night, B. I love this little tidbit of history. Britain and Portugal could not fully Christianize India, mainly for one reason, and that reason is the Mahabharata, the Vedas, the Gita, all of our texts in Hinduism were already written. They had more respect for the written word, the already written word, as law than they did for the people who wrote them. So Christianization was not successful in India. I have spoken in this book about Abelot's alphabetic encyclopedia, the gigantic leaves of the description of Egypt, Renan's laboratory museum notebooks, the ellipses and short episodes of Lane's Modern Egyptians, Sayce's anthological excerpts, and so forth. This piano piece is stunning. These pages are the signs of some Orient and some Orientalists presented to the reader. There is an order to these pages by which the reader apprehends not only the Orient but also the Orientalist. As interpreter, exhibitor, personality, mediator, representative, and representing expert. In a remarkable way, Gibb and Massignon produce pages that recapitulate the history of the Orientalist writing in the West, as that history has been embodied in a very generic and topographical style, reduced finally to a scholarly, monographic uniformity. The Oriental specimen, the Oriental excess, lexicographical unit, the Oriental series, and exaplume, all of them have been subordinated in Gibb and Massignon to linear prose authority of discursive analysis, presented in essay, short article, scholarly book, in their time from the end of World War I until the late 60s. I'm going to put this music off because I think that I'm going to get copyright struck for that. I don't think this is that was Twitch friendly. In their time, from the end of World War I till the early 60s, three principal forms of Orientalist writing were radically transformed: the encyclopedia, anthology, and personal record. The authority was redistributed or dispersed or dissipated to a committee of experts, Encyclopedia of Islam, the Cambridge History of Islam, to a law and order of service, such as elementary instruction in language, which could prepare one not for diplomacy, as was the case with Sayce's Chrestomathie, but for the study of sociology, economics, or history. To the realm of sensational revelation, having more to do with personalities or governments, Lawrence is the obvious example, than with knowledge. Gibb, with his quietly heedless but profoundly sequential prose, and Massignon with the flair of an artist for whom no reference is too extravagant, so long as it is governed by an eccentric interpretive gift. The two scholars took on essentially ecumenical authority of European Orientalism as far as it could go. After them, the new reality, the new specialized style, was, broadly speaking, Anglo-American, and more narrowly speaking, American social sciences. In it, the old Orientalism was broken into many parts, yet all of them still served the traditional Orientalist dogmas. And that is the end of part 3. I was wrong. I am singing the Nikita wrong song. That I've been saying that we were on part 4 already. No, we were not. Yeah, because I think it was wishful thinking that we had gone that far. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to yeah. Edward does like to ramble. He does indeed. Well, he did. I was fortunate enough to hear him speak live at an event when I was in high school. Let me find the details of it. Yeah, I was in I'm going to try to find the video. Because this was from the District 6 Museum in Cape Town in 2001 in my senior year of high school. And I'll try to find it later. It is absolutely gorgeous. The way in which he identified me. The ways in which he linked Palestine and South Africa were quite different to the usual. Of like, this is an apartheid state, that's an apartheid state, all of those kinds of things. Why can I not... What? Please tell me again, which university arrested all of those students who were protesting for Palestine? Which was the first one? Because this is Columbia University's research page. I've been blocked. Yeah, I can't access their journals. The paper that I'm trying to access is Power, Politics and Culture, Interviews with Edward Saïd in 2002. What in the Texas is correct? But I do remember the basic functions of that lecture. He was saying that the binational solution of a shared sovereignty for Israel and Palestine can be held up against the political realism of the South African model, based on the goals of coexistence and equality with hope and truth and reconciliation. But the overwhelming lesson of South Africa's recent political history is looking carefully not just at the complex history of ethnic antagonism, and the concept of moving on cannot exist within a binational solution or the two-state solution. It is with one state that Palestine can continue being a nation and those people continuing to exist. I'm not magic, I'm just a troublemaker. Power, Politics and Culture, Interviews with Edward W. Saïd. Yeah, I'm just a troublemaker. But he said the binational solution cannot exist because of the South African model. That, you cannot expect an oppressed people to live right next to a sovereign country of their oppressors. Because when they came for land in the first place and they're going to continue going for the land, I don't know. He was Marxist, so I was very, very lucky. to be able to attend that lecture at the District 6 Museum in 2001. I was in my matric year, or senior year, as you guys call it. Yeah, I... Archive.org. Okay, thank you. You worked for archives.org? Tenby, please try to get me a job. Hi. Please, you know people who like, please try to get me a job. Because, I mean, the fishy got me fired. And I don't know. I cannot join your gang. I could not join your gang. Because you will be found and arrested within the first 5 minutes of me being there. Thank you. Discord is best. Okay, so we get to part 4. Any questions? Thank you, JJ. So we get to part 4, the latest phase. The latest phase of Orientalism. And believe you me, Orientalism isn't a thing of the past. Orientalist study may not be like a fully fledged field in most places. I mean, we still have SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, as in London. So don't think Orientalism is dead. We should not be saying Orientals as a group of people. We should not be referring to West Asia and eastward as the Orient. But Orientalism as a field of study, as a practice, as a mode of thought, as a frame of reference, it is not dead, because colonialism is not dead. Since World War II, and more noticeably after each of the Arab-Israeli wars, the Arab Muslim has become a figure in American popular culture, even as in the academic world, in the policy planners world, and the world of business, and very serious attention is being paid to the Arab. This symbolizes a major change in the international configuration of forces. France and Britain no longer occupied the center stage in world politics. The American imperium has displaced them. A vast web of interest now links all parts of the former colonial world to the United States. Just as a proliferation of academic subspecialties divides and yet connects all former philological and European-based disciplines like Orientalism. The area specialists, as he is now called, lays claim to regional expertise, which is put at the service of government or business, or both. Same really. The massive quasi-material knowledge stored in the annals of modern European Orientalism, as recorded, for example, in Jules Moll's 19th century logbook of the field, has been dissolved and released in new forms. A wide variety of hybrid representations of the Orient now roam the culture: Japan, Indochina, China, India, Pakistan. Their representations have had and continue to have wide repercussions, as they have been discussed in many places for obvious reasons. Thank you so much. Wait, I think I may have done maths. Tell me if it's right. I may have done a maths. Yay! I did under maths. Um, this makes me unreasonably happy. Thank you so much, JJ. WJJ in the chat. Islam and the Arabs have had their own representations too, and we shall treat them here as they occur in that fragmentary, yet powerfully ideologically coherent persistence, as a far less frequently discussed one, into which the US traditional European Orientalism dispersed itself. 1. Popular images and social science representations. Here are a few examples of how the Arab is often represented today. Note how readily the Arab seems to accommodate the transformation and reductions of simply all conditions kind into which he is continually being forced. The costume for Princeton's 10th reunion class of 1967 had been planned before the June War. The motif, for it would be wrong to describe the costume as more than crudely suggestive, was to have been Arab: robes, headgear, sandal. Immediately after the war, when it had become clear that the Arab motif was an embarrassment, a change in the reunion plans was decreed. Wearing the costume had been originally planned, the class was now to walk in procession, hands above their heads, in a gesture of abject defeat. This was what the Arab had become. From a faintly outlined stereotype as a camel-riding nomad to an accepted caricature as the embodiment of incompetence and easy defeat. That was all the scope given to the Arab. Yet after the 1973 war, the Arab appeared everywhere as something more menacing. Cartoons depicting an Arab sheikh standing behind a gasoline pump turned up constantly. These Arabs, however, were clearly Semitic: sharply hooked noses, eviled moustache leer on their faces, were obvious reminders to a largely non-Semitic population that Semites were at the bottom of all quote-unquote our troubles, in which this case was principally a gasoline shortage. Transference of a popular anti-Semitic animus from Jewish to Arab target was made smoothly, since the figure was essentially the same. And a cartoonist, I cannot remember when it was because this was in the 90s, admitted to using one of his older cartoons depicting a Jewish person and just changed the dress. Thus, if the Arab occupies space enough for attention, it has a negative value. He is seen as the disruptor of Israel's and the West's existence, or in another view of the same thing, as a surmountable obstacle to Israel's creation in 1948. They forget that there are Jewish Arab people. You know, the ones that they didn't allow into Israel because they're brown? They are black Jewish people. Also the ones that they didn't allow into Israel because they're black. Insofar as this Arab has any history, it is part of a history only that is given to him, or taken from him. The difference is slight, by the Orientalist tradition and later the Zionist tradition. Palestine was seen by Lamartine and the early Zionists as an empty desert waiting to burst into bloom. Such inhabitants, as it were, supposed to be inconsequential nomads possessing no real claim to the land and therefore no cultural or national reality. Thus the Arab is conceived of now as a shadow that dogs the Jew. In that shadow, because Arabs and Jews are Oriental Semites, can be placed whatever tradition, latent mistrust the Westerner feels towards the Oriental. for the Jewish person of pre-Nazi Europe has bifurcated. For what we have now is a Jewish hero constructed out of the reconstructed cult of adventurer pioneer Orientalists such as Burton, Lane, and Renan. And his creeping, mysteriously fearsome shadow, the Arab Oriental, isolated from everything except the past that was created for him by the Orientalist polemic. The Arab is chained to a destiny that fixes him and dooms him to a series of reactions, periodically chastised by what Barbara Tuchman gives the theological name Israel's terrible swift sword. Aside from his anti-Zionism, the Arab is an oil supplier. This is another negative characteristic, since most accounts of Arab oil equate the oil boycott of 1973 to 74, which principally benefited Western oil companies and a small ruling Arab elite, with the absence of any Arab moral qualification for owning such vast oil reserves. Without the usual euphemisms, the question most often being asked is why such people such as Arabs are entitled to keep the developed, free, democratic, moral world threatened. From such questions comes frequent suggestions that the Arab oil fields be invaded, which is what they're doing, and have always been doing. In films and television, the Arab is associated either with lechery or bloodthirsty dishonesty, appearing as oversexed degenerate, capable, it is true, of cleverly devious intrigues, but essentially sadistic, treacherous, low slave trading, camel driving, money changing, colorful scoundrel. These are some traditional Arab roles in cinema. The Arab leader of marauders, pirates, native insurgents can be seen snarling at the captured Western hero and the blonde girl, both of them steeped in wholesomeness. My men are going to kill you, but they like to amuse themselves before. Leering suggestively as he speaks. This is the debasement of Valentino's sheikh. In newsreels and news photos, Arabs are always shown in large numbers. No individuality, no personal characteristic, no experience. Most of the pictures represent mass rage and misery or irrational, hence hopelessly eccentric, gestures. Lurking behind all of these images is the menace of what they call jihad, consequence, a fear that Muslims or Arabs will take over the world. And Arab and Muslim, for them, are interchangeable. Books and articles regularly published on Islam and Arabs represent absolutely no change over the virulent anti-Islamic polemics of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. For no other ethnic or religious group is it true that virtually anything can be written or said about it without challenge or demurral. The 1975 course guide put out by Columbia said about the Arabic course and every other word in the language had to do with violence. The Arab mind, as reflected in the language, was unremittingly bombastic. An article by Emma Tyrrell in Harper's Magazine was even more slanderous and racist, arguing that the Arabs are murderers and the violence and deceit carried out by the Arabs are in their genes. A survey titled "The Arabs in American Textbooks" reveals the most astonishing misinformation, or rather the most callous representations of an ethnic religious group, since the Jewish people were represented by the Nazis. One book asserts that few people of this area even know that there is a better way to live. Ew. Hang on, what is the better way to live? Would you rather have free healthcare or 276 different types of ranch sauce? I counted. It goes on to ask disarmingly, what links the people of the Middle East together? The answer given unhesitatingly is the last link is the Arabs' hostility, hatred towards the Jews and the nation of Israel. Along with such material goes this about Islam in another book. Islam began in the 7th century, started by a wealthy businessman of Arabia called Muhammad. He claims he was a prophet, found followers among other Arabs, told them that they were picked to rule the world. This bit of knowledge is followed by another, equally inaccurate. Shortly after Muhammad's death, his teachings were recorded in the book called the Quran, became the holy book of Islam. These crude ideas are supported, not contradicted, by the academic whose business is the study of the Arab Near East. Worth noting, incidentally, that the Princeton event I referred to took place at a university that prides itself on its Department of Near Eastern Studies, founded in 1927, the oldest such department in the US. Take as an instance the report produced in 1967 by Morrow Berger, a professor of sociology in Near Eastern Studies at Princeton, at the behest of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. He was then president of the Middle East Studies Association, the professional association of scholars concerned with all aspects of what they call the Near East, primarily since the rise of Islam and from the viewpoint of the social science and humanistic disciplines, founded in 1967. He called his paper Middle Eastern and North African Studies, Developments and Needs, and had it published in the second issue of the Misa Bulletin. After surveying the strategic, economic, and political importance of the region to the U.S., and after endorsing the various U.S. government and private foundation projects to support programs in universities, the National Defense Education Act of 1958, a directly Sputnik-inspired initiative, established links between the Social Science Research Council and the Middle Eastern Studies. Berger came to the following conclusion. The modern Middle East and North Africa is not a center of great cultural achievement, nor is it likely to become one of the near future. The study of the region, languages, therefore, does not constitute its own reward, so far as modern culture is concerned. Our region is not at the center of great political power, nor does it have the potential to become one. The Middle East, and less so North Africa, has been receding in immediate political importance to the U.S. Take away his PhD, and even the headline on nuisance value relative to Africa, Latin America, and the Far East. The contemporary Middle East has only a small degree and kind of traits that seem to be important in attracting scholarly attention. It does not diminish the validity and intellectual value of studying the area or affect the quality of works that scholars do on it. It does, however, put limits of which we should be aware on the field's capacity for growth in the numbers who study and teach it. I hope he has salt and pepper and many, many other spices to eat with his hat at those words. As a prophecy, of course, this is fairly lamentable. What makes it even more unfortunate is that Berger was commissioned not only because he was a so-called expert on the modern Near East, but also, as is clear from the report's conclusion, because he was expected to be in a good position to predict its future. The future of policy. Not so good soup, absolutely. His failure to see that the Middle East was of great political significance and potentially great political power was no chance aberration of judgment. Both of Berger's main mistakes derive from the first and last paragraphs, whose genealogy is the history of Orientalism, as we have been studying it. In what Berger has to say about the absence of great cultural achievement, and in what he concludes about future study, that the Middle East does not attract scholarly attention because of its intrinsic weakness, we have an almost exact duplication of the canonical Orientalist opinion that the Semites have never produced a great culture, and as Renan frequently said, the Semitic world was too impoverished to attract universal attention. In making such time-honored judgments and being totally blind to what it is before his eyes, after all, Berger was not writing 50 years ago, but during a period where the U.S. was already importing about 10% of its oil from the Middle East, and when its strategic and economic investments in the area were unimaginably huge. Berger was ensuring that the centrality of his own position as Orientalist, for what he says, in effect, is that without people such as he, the Middle East would be neglected. And without his mediating interpretive role, the place would not be understood, partly because what little there is to understand in this fairly peculiar place, and partly because only the Orientalist can interpret the Orient, incapable of interpreting itself. That is where I'm going to stop for today. I feel my sinuses starting to act up. Any questions? All right. Twitch and YouTube, I don't see anyone here, so I'm going to stop streaming now.